Well, hi. Welcome
Hello.
to. Hi, it's so nice to see you. We are here today, and we'll introduce ourselves in a sec, but we are here today talking about creating supportive structure, so self care for neurodivergence. So I am Elle Bower Johnston. You can also call me Elle because that's how I spell it, and I'm totally fine with it either way. I use she and they pronouns, and I am my professional title that I use is that I'm a bodywitch, which essentially means that my work is an alchemization of breathwork and somatics and rest practices with witchcraft and like folk magic. So they all weave in together. Yeah, I tend to work with like creatives and change makers and other witches to help them get into deeper relationship with their bodies so that they can be in deeper connection with life and their magic. Yeah, that's me, and I'm here with Bridget.
Hi, I'm Brigitte. I absolutely loved hearing all of that. I'm absolutely in the right place, knowing you and having this conversation with you today. I'm Brigitte, she, her, also self-acclaimed systems and self-care witch.
Witches
I build
everywhere.
yeah, just it's so good to hear that out loud, I think, and to say it out loud. But I build intentional systems for neurodivergent creatives who want to feel proud, successful, and get shit done. I primarily do this in Notion. I make Notion templates that are a launch pad to helping you cross the finish line on your projects. And I do that as well as one-on-one work and custom projects as well. And
Nice.
so today we're going to ask each other a few questions about our self-care practices as neurodivergent people. And are you ready to dive
Let's
in?
let's go.
Okay, so first one, what are your favorite self-care practices? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So
Okay.
I was thinking about this question, and my brain immediately was like, okay, disclaimer. Disclaimer: self care is only half the story. So like community care and like naming systems of
Yes.
oppression are so much a part of like my own self-care and like what I do with clients that like I'm like, cool, I think self-care is a brilliant and beautiful thing. And I also think that, capitalism is going to capitalism, and it's done that thing where it's like self-care is buying more stuff and like having nice candles and things. So that's my my disclaimer straight out. Yeah, but like
Yeah.
when I think about my own practices and like my own self-care practices, the thing that I really kind of come back to time and time again is like, what do I need right now to be awake and resourced and connected to life, the divine, whatever you want to call it. What do I need to feel really fully alive in my life? And when I can kind of answer that question, and it changes so often, when I can answer that question, I can be here for myself and be present for myself, and then also take that off the mat, or like off my away from my altar or whatever it is that I'm practicing, and out into the world around me. Take it to my relationships and my community, and the way I move in the world. Yeah. So those are my sort of like my spiel, I suppose, beforehand. And the things that like personally really resonate for me in terms of the actions that I take that bring me to life. A lot of them are things that I teach. So, like, breath work is really big, rest practices, which I resist so hard. And then when I do them, I'm like, oh, wow, this is magic. Why didn't anybody tell me, even though I teach this and I am trained in this?
I
And
feel
like,
that so hard.
I know it's so embarrassing. Like, I'm literally a rest teacher, and every time I'm like, I don't need that, really, do I? Um, yeah, so those are two really big ones, as well as like somatic movement. So I kind of started my journey into self care wellness world through yoga, and being a yoga teacher. But then that has unfolded and expanded into much more wiggly somatics. So like knowing the landscape of my nervous system with a bit more intimacy than I did before, and being able to just be like, oh wow, there's anxiety. Okay, cool. Like, I'm gonna put on a song and I'm gonna shake around and dance. And so, yeah, like movement practices, but they're always super wiggly and like direct, like, from what my body actually needs, rather than from like some kind of set external visual practice. Yeah, so those three are really big, really, really big, and they kind of circle, like they are things that I circle on a regular basis. Yeah, and then I also have a lot of magical practices that are really grounding and bringing me into that kind of self care, tending. So the practice of tarot, building little altars around my house, and kind of making these spaces that are kind of a touchstone for connection. Journaling, which is super boring and everyone says it all the time, but it's super helpful for me. And yeah, like things like cycle tracking and like knowing where my, what is happening in my body, so it isn't just chaos. That's all been really, really helpful for me, in terms of favorite self-care practices. And then lastly, like being a super like big nature nerd, and like foraging and bird watching and just like being out in the world and being like, hello animate friends, how are we? Yeah, those are all of the things. And when I kind of list them out loud, I'm like, shit, like that's a lot of stuff, but it really feels like it's not like I'm doing that every day, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just like a toolbox of like, what do I need right now? You kind of rummage
Yeah.
around and find out.
I am only laughing because so many things that you said, I was like, that's exactly what I noted for myself.
Yeah.
And I love that you use the word wiggly as a descriptor. That just brought me a lot of joy. Um, but I also agree with your everything you said up front about before you got into your favorite self-care practices. So I am also really in line with honestly most of what you said. But so my quick and dirty, these are my like absolute go-to things. Number one is journaling. And
The
for me, it's
words.
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy because my whole entire life I never thought that I could journal. I had a really strange relationship with it, and now to be like, oh, that's my one thing that I do have to do every single morning. It just seems crazy to me, but like that's and how I do it now is I brain dump. So I don't necessarily follow anything, but I let everything that's in my head come out on the paper. And that's been so helpful for me. My other one that I do every single day is I have a cycle syncing smoothie. So I also pay attention to my menstrual cycle, and I tailor my ingredients and everything that I put into this smoothie based on what phase of my cycle I'm in. I also do magical practices throughout all of these things. So as I'm making my smoothie, I am infusing it with the vibes or the intention, the affirmations that I chose to hold on to for that week, like something that I'm like calling in or working on. I'm infusing that into my smoothie. So that feels really cool too. It's really like simple things, but they're impactful. And my other ones are I go for walks almost every day if I can, and just like a little walk around the block. And then feeding and watching the birds in my backyard, because now I am a birder. Now I'm obsessed with birds. And I also never thought that I would say that either. So these things are surprising to me.
I know.
But yeah. And then the other one is when the weather is nice, I like to play tennis. I feel like I need to put the disclaimer out that I don't actually know how to play a game of tennis. My partner is teaching me. So it's basically just us hitting the ball back and forth.
Amazing.
And that is good enough for us. It's amazing for like energy. It's amazing for like getting out emotions. I also know that I need a lot of movement for myself to process through things. So I also have a wall in my basement set up that I can just hit tennis balls on. So if I'm feeling any certain way, I can just go down there and move it out.
I love that. I love that. That's so awesome. And like, yeah, I think there's also a really interesting kind of relational piece in that as well, right? Like, one of the things I kind of noted down, which I'm not sure I could technically call a self-care practice, but definitely, fits in with the, like, it brings me to connection with life, is like co-regulating with my partner, like, spending time, like hugging and like being near each other and being like, being in relationship, and, whether it's a partner or friends or community or whatever, like, that is as much self-care as, me lying down and making myself really cozy and doing a breathwork practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
And pets.
Yes.
Also co-regulating
so there's so much.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, well, let's kind of wander away from our personal practices for a moment and talk about everyone else's practices. Do you have any like thoughts on how people can choose or build practices if they're new to it? Like, for people who are, or for people who are just learning that they're neurodivergent, like what would you hold front and center for that?
Yeah. Okay. So what I would hold front and center is first allowing yourself to be curious and experiment. So like if you have an open mind, I feel like it's going to be a lot easier to try things. And considering that these self-care practices might not look quote unquote typical. Yeah, I would start there, excuse me. And just allowing yourself to try things and see what happens and like keep iterating. And a good way that I have figured out how to do that is by making a list. And the list doesn't necessarily have to be like bullet points. I've made this in like Notion and a cute little Kanban board. But just starting with an inventory of some things that maybe you already enjoy that you could count as self-care. And then this way you have something to look at when you're like, oh, I need something. It's not like you're trying to like pull something out of the air, like, oh my God, like
from nothing.
Yeah. Right. Like what could I even do? I don't even know what I like in this moment. But if you do that work like care? Ahead of time, right. Like what I don't know. And yeah, I find that that's really helpful for my brain. And I've heard that it's helpful from a lot of other people as well, is to be able to see it. So you're not trying to like pull it from somewhere, especially if you're in a place where you might be feeling dysregulated. It's going to be harder to recall those things. So to be able to have your little toolkit that's like, here are some options of some self-care practices. And then you can kind of like pick and choose in the moment and see what works, see what doesn't work, and keep kind of like building and adding and subtracting. And I think that would be kind of like where I would start if I was like just starting.
Yeah. I love that. It's almost like making yourself like a little menu to choose from. Like, you know,
Yes.
sort of
Oh, yeah.
you showed up and you're like at this restaurant of needing something and you're like, what's here today? What do I feel like? And it's like, yeah, it's such a
Yes.
sweet,
Oh,
simple way of
that's a
caring.
beautiful, yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah. What would you, where would
Yeah.
you start out?
I think like, yeah, getting it down is a really big one for me as well. Like, you know, sort of, I think it can be so easy, especially as someone like, you know, who is neurodivergent, to kind of really bash ourselves up for not just knowing. Like, we'd be
Mm,
like, I should know this already, or like, you know, I should have this figured out. I
uh-huh.
shouldn't need to write this down. Like, you know, how stupid is it that I can't remember what I need? And I think, yeah, like it's such a simple thing to just write yourself a little list. Or like, I love to have index cards of like my
Mm,
rituals, so that like when I show up and I'm like, cool, I'm gonna sit at my altar and I'm gonna, you know, have a little moment at my altar doing kind of something slightly magical. But I have like a card that is like, great, like how do I open this space for myself? You know, how do I, you know, these are the options of what I might do when I'm at my altar. How do I close this space so that I don't have to carry it in my brain all the time? I can just put it down. And I'm sure one could
yes.
do that in
Oh,
Notion as well. I am very analog girl, but like you could definitely do that in Notion as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God, it's like having an SOP for your witchcraft practice, like having
It
your like
100%
standard
is
operating
like, yeah, like
procedure.
I like, and you know, my girlfriend and I
Yes.
have taken this real far. Like she has it for like cleaning. I have it for like my
Ah,
daily like
yeah.
movement practice of like the sort of menu of like, cool, like here's all of the options that you could play with today. What do you need? Like, but just giving yourself, yeah, that like that containment, which you know, I think it's
Yes.
so easy to be really resistant to, of like, I shouldn't need
Mm-hmm.
this, or like, you know, I'm somehow failing if I can't just do this for myself. But like, as someone who is neurospicy, neurodivergent, like giving yourself that containment can be such a gift, such like, and it gives you that sort of like edge that you can then be playful within.
Mm-hmm. I think it gives you freedom too,
Yeah, yeah,
because like
for sure.
then you have that you all your creative and magical and wonderful like brain space is open to
Mm,
do the practice because you're not trying to, pick and choose and decide and recall. You have all that
yes,
space freed up. Yeah,
yes.
that's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, so that's like the really practical, like, write it down, systemize it for yourself, even if that sounds super boring. Like, even if it's just, you know, like write it on a journal page or do whatever feels good for you, put it on a post it. But yeah, giving yourself like a system, and that system can change and it can evolve, but like trying to sort of play with it or like stay with it for a little while and seeing what you need within that containment. And then, yeah, like some kind of attitudes that I would really that I wish I had been offered when I first started doing my own practices was like, meet yourself where you're at. Like, what if there is nothing to fix about you? What if
Mm,
you just like, if this is just a something that you are doing to care for yourself as you are, not to fix yourself, so you can show up exactly as you are, like, you know, messy brained, big feelings, you know, scattered, exhausted, whatever it is. And that's, you know, your practice has space to hold you in that.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
That
like, that
is,
your practice
uh,
gets to be like shaped for you and your needs rather than needing to look like some measurable external metric of like, this is what a successful self care practice looks like.
yeah, I think that I had one of my most revelatory things happen in therapy when I went in and I was going through a really rough mental space. And I was telling my therapist about all of these self care things that I was doing, right, to try to feel better. And she was like, holy shit, Bridget, you get like the star of like all clients everywhere taking care of their mental health. Like, holy shit. And I was like, yeah, but I still feel terrible. And she gave me exactly what you just said, that Brigitte, the point of self-care is just showing up and taking care of yourself. The point of self-care isn't necessarily that you're going to feel this certain way afterwards. It's just knowing that like you're just showing up and you're taking care of yourself, and look at what you're doing for yourself even when you feel so terrible.
Yeah,
And
I love
it's
that.
just that, yeah, it's just that act of that self-care, that self-love that makes it important and worth it and worthy and enough. And that really like helped to, I think, change my mindset, right? Because then I wasn't looking necessarily for certain outcomes or for my practice to have to look a certain way. And instead, I just hold on to the intention that I'm just showing up and caring for myself, and we're going to see what happens. Bring in the curiosity.
Yes, yes. Again, it's that like that freedom of containment, right? You're just like, cool. There's no, I put this in and then I get this out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on to the next one. Let's see. What do you do when you fall off the proverbial wagon? I really like I really like this because I literally visualize things in my head. So I visualize like a, like an old timey, like
Like covered
just,
wagon. Like,
yes, a
oh
covered wagon. That's exactly like what I'm seeing in my brain as I think about this question. So if your practices go by the wayside, how do you reinvigorate them or get restarted when that happens?
no. Yeah. I mean, that's the one, right? Like I have spent the last 8 years teaching people how to practice in different ways, and I'm not always great at practicing what I preach. Yeah, I have fallen off the wagon or been distant from my practice so many times, so many times, and I think the thing that really helps is almost taking like an animist kind of approach to your practice. Like your practice is not a thing that you are creating, it's a thing that you're in relationship with. And so like, you can move closer and you can move more distant. But if I don't speak to my best friend for 2 weeks, or if I don't call my mum for a month, that relationship isn't gone. Like I'm not starting from scratch. Like I can just come back. It's like that felt,
Yes.
it took me so long to realize
Oh,
that like it wasn't a reason. Like if I didn't need to be beating myself up, I didn't need to be giving myself the whole like, wow, I really suck at this. Why can't I commit? Why don't I have any discipline? Why is everything so hard to do consistently? And just be like, cool, I'm in this relationship, and for whatever reason, it got a little distant, and I feel like I want to get back to it. So how do I get back to it? Yeah, that's
I
my main the main thing I've learned about this from my personal experience.
Yeah, that's like, it's so funny that you brought that up. I never have thought about a practice in that way, but it makes so much sense. And it's exactly a conversation that I was just having with somebody else the other day about how, like, when we have fallen off our things, like our yoga practice, or I was specifically talking about my walks when I just had COVID and I wasn't able to go for my walks. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm just not somebody who walks anymore. And she's like, Brigitte,
Or
excuse me? Wait, what? But it's so easy to get caught up in that, like beating yourself up about it. And I think that really is really helpful to look at it as, oh, this could be, I could look at it as the same way as a relationship with a friend. And oh yeah, you just connected some good things in my brain here.
and I
And
think the thing. Sorry. not to talk
Yeah,
over
no,
you. I
that's
think the
okay.
interesting thing about like the analogy of a relationship is that like sometimes a relationship does have to change, right? Like sometimes, you know, you've stepped away from a practice because actually it's not the right fit anymore, and you need to kind of reassess and be like, oh, I thought that doing 30 minutes of yoga every day was really like, it was working for a while, but it's not working anymore. Like, what do I need now? So it can be like, you know, that falling off or that kind of like distancing can be a point where you can check back in, right? And be like, oh, okay, like, why? Like, why have I let go of this? You know, maybe everything got too busy. Maybe I had like a massive, you know, maybe there was like a massive thing that happened and I just didn't have the space or the capacity for it. Maybe this doesn't feel nourishing to me anymore. Maybe anything, you know. But you get to just kind of recenter yourself and be like, great, well, what do I need now? You know?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up is like getting curious about, right, like why I fell off. Or yeah, like what was going on in my life, like what was happening, kind of like assessing and then reassessing the situation. Like, you know, like if seasonal shifts, that's a big one for me. Like as seasons shift, my practices shift. If, yeah, maybe I was trying a practice and what I was needing from it, like wasn't actually being fulfilled. And I need to like change it up a little bit. Yeah. And I think that also my other thing was going back to exactly what you were saying, but just like giving yourself grace and compassion for like when it does happen, and that allowance to, I guess, be curious and experiment with it, find out maybe how you might want to change it or try something new or try to do it in a different way or let it fall off entirely. That can feel hard to like let things go, but sometimes it's just, it's time, and it's time to then like, you know, go to your list and pick out a new one off that
I
list.
guess we're going to play with this one right now. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's so funny, like, you know, the way we get taught, like, almost like rigidity, or like, you know, you're meant to be the same all the time. Like, you're meant to choose a thing and then just be the same. And, you know, I think generally as humans, we're not that. Like, I think we are inherently prone to change. But I think especially as neurodivergent humans,
Yes.
like, we thrive on that change. We like, you know, we kind of have to walk the line between like jumping ship before, you know, to bring another method of transport in, like jumping off the wagon before you don't actually have to be off the wagon,
Yes.
you know, for whatever reason. But also like, yeah, knowing like sometimes you need to change, and that's great. Yeah, I think like the thing that I always come back to in terms of like discipline and like discerning when to stick and when to twist, right, is like the kind of using discipline as a sense of devotion. Like, you know, if the practice still feels really resonant, still feels like it takes you somewhere, but there's resistance coming up for whatever reason, then you devote yourself, right? Then you kind of, you like really almost bring that like holy monk energy to it. You're like, cool, I'm gonna continue moving forwards, even if it's like a teeny tiny step every day. But if you suddenly find the thing that you're trying to devote yourself to doesn't feel magical or connected or connective, then yeah, then you get to change. And that's because we're human. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. I think this
Amazing.
all also, excuse me, leads similarly. I think I have like very similar things going into our next question. Would you like to ask
Yeah. Tell me, how do you make space for neurodivergence in your practices? Like your neurodivergence in your practices, because it's always different.
Yeah. This is I this is funny to me. Everything we're saying, I'm like, it's so on. But just allowing myself to experiment and find out what works for me. And then I wrote down, and then being diligent with the follow through. So yeah, I think that the way that you said it as devotion, I think speaks beautifully to it. That so if I find that I am in the place where I know that this self-care practice is something that, I'm craving. I know that when I practice this, right, like I feel fulfilled. I get the benefits from it. It makes my world a better place. It helps me to show up better. But I'm like having hella resistance to it for whatever reason, which I think that like resistance can very easily show up for neurodivergent folks. It's for me, what I've realized is I have to also then figure out how is going to be the best way for me to do that practice. And that might mean that I also need something else, and it's okay. So like my biggest example is that I have a hard time doing a yoga practice at home. And yoga was my first foray into into myself, into, connecting myself in my body and finding me. And so I know that this is like, above all else, it's like my highest thing. I carry, right, like everything that I have learned from yoga throughout my entire day.
Yeah.
It's just how I live my life now. But like getting to an actual mat for like an amount of time, that is just like, sometimes it feels absolutely impossible. So I kind of got curious about my yoga practices like over the years. And I looked at when I was doing yoga almost every single day. And I'm like, what are the conditions that helped make that possible? And then I can kind of like apply that. So I noticed that I do really well when I go to classes in person. Like I had a studio that I really loved. There was a schedule. There's somebody else instructing me. I am handing my money over to somebody and they are telling me what to do. And I am showing up and I am practicing. And so while I can't necessarily check all of those boxes here at home, I have done my best to kind of like adapt those pieces of it, right? So by like putting myself on a schedule, or maybe finding a virtual class to attend, or even just getting the accountability of it from like checking in with a friend and being like, hey, I want to do my yoga practice every Thursday night. Can I like check in with you every Thursday and be like, I did yoga? And if I don't text you, can you text me? Like, so like
Amazing.
having that, like, so finding out like what I needed to have in order to like make this happen, and giving myself that grace and compassion that like, it's okay that I need these things, and having that also be like part of the practice.
Yeah. I love how like systemized your brain is. My brain does not work like that. Like I love that you kind of come at a problem, you're like, let me go back and check all of the conditions that were in place when I was doing this thing. I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just going to continue figuring it out. It's like wild and magic to me. I'm here for it. Yeah, it's like but I think that that real like compassionate permission piece is so big for me as well. I don't really have like I practice at home by myself mostly. Like I have got to a point in like my teaching and my like doing so much of teaching yoga, teaching breathwork, all of this sort of stuff that I really know what I like, and I also have trouble being like letting other people hold space for that. So I really love to build in containers for myself, so that so that they can hold me in my home practice and my self practice. So yeah, I mean, some of them are things that we've already talked about. So like writing menus for myself, writing rituals for myself. Like these are little containers that I build. Sidestepping decision fatigue by like habit stacking. So like, being like, great, I know that every morning I go downstairs with my girlfriend, we eat breakfast, I come back to upstairs, I light some incense, I open the space, I do some movement, I write in my journal, I close the space. Like every morning, that is what I do. It is the ritual that like happens after I eat breakfast. And then, the rest of my day happens. So yeah, giving myself that kind of, that pre-made decision. So I don't have to be like, am I going to do it today? What time am I doing it? And then you've got time to like negotiate with yourself and trying to wiggle out of it. And like, you just spend the whole day thinking about this thing that you feel like you should be doing, but you're not doing it. That's real tiring. And I think in terms of like, really, meeting myself where I'm at, I have gotten kind of really, what's the word I'm trying to look for? I don't have to be still or quiet, and I don't expect that of myself. And I think, especially if you're looking at like meditative practices or like mindfulness practices, or even yoga practices, like a lot of the time, right? Like there's a lot of the idea that we need to be still and we need to be quiet, and our brains need to be still and quiet. And my brain is very rarely still or quiet. And so, the practices that I practice kind of meet me in that. So yeah, that's really important. And then what else? I have basically my answers, like the notes that I took for this answer were just like a whole bunch of exclamation marks. Just like this, and then this, and then this. So yeah, the other little container that I found really, really, really helpful for like a home-based practice was creating little playlists. And I only started playing with this like last year, but just like 20-minute playlists that I'm like, great, this is the container. I put this on, I put my headphones on, this is it. Like, it's been so helpful for me. But yeah, those are how
that's a really cool idea.
It's great. I can recommend it.
On to the last question.
It brings us to our last question. Yes.
Okay. What is the most surprising thing you've learned from or discovered about your self-care practices? I think this is my favorite question.
I honestly found this one like the hardest to answer. And I know it was a question that I proposed. And then I was like, I don't have an answer for this.
My answer really surprised me.
Come on, tell me. I want to know it.
Okay. So I have realized that my ADHD symptoms are more manageable when I'm taking better care of myself, or like devoting enough self-care to myself. And I didn't realize this until I started like sliding off, right? Falling off of that wagon. And then I started noticing, my symptoms getting like way more challenging, or I was starting to have a lot harder of a time. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? Which was a great benchmarker of like, oh, Brigitte, look at like all the stuff that you're doing to care for yourself. And it's like really having a big impact.
Mm.
Like, so it was a really great kind of moment of acknowledgement of like, oh, I'm doing a really great job. And
Yeah.
these things actually like do make a difference. And the way that I think the biggest way that I personally notice it is I typically have had a really hard time falling asleep at night. So
Mm-hmm.
like lay in bed and just like my mind is fucking everywhere. And I do have what do I call it? Like a resource or a technique that I've gotten from therapy that helps me to essentially bore my brain.
Amazing.
To like bore it enough so that I can fall asleep. So the one that I do is it's like going through the alphabet and I'm naming fruits or vegetables that start with each letter.
Oh
And
my God, I love it.
I typically fall asleep before I hit the end, or I might like start over again. But however, I've noticed that if I do get in bed and my brain is just absolutely going off and I am just tossing and turning and like nothing's working, then that's when I know that like, oh, I have either like overwhelmed myself, I have like pushed myself too far, like overexerted myself, maybe, you know, like I didn't do the my typical practices.
Mm.
And so like something about me, I've just kind of like let go or like run myself into the ground. Like I know if I watch TV too late at night, I can't shut my brain off. Or like so I have put like very intentional and strict like guidelines or boundaries, I guess,
Mm.
around when I do things. So like I don't watch TV after 9 p.m. Or like things like that, because I realized that then that really affects me.
Yeah,
And I was
I
very
love that.
surprised by that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so funny, isn't it? Because like the whole point of a self care practice or like a regular practice is that it becomes regular, and so you don't necessarily see that like I did this and then there was this immediate
Yeah.
change. It's kind of like it's a slow drip, and then it's only when it's taken away that you're like, oh, that was doing something. Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that like I thought like that came to me as the most surprising. Like, and when I think about like 20-something-year-old me who first started, first walked into a yoga class because she wanted to lose weight,
Mm.
and I think about like all of the things that my self-care practices have given me that have nothing to do with how my body looks and everything to do with how much more I am present
Mm.
and aware and like within my life, how much I'm able to show up and be in relationship with intention and consciousness, how much more powerful and like how much more agency I feel like I have in my life. You know, what else? God, there's so much that like when I kind of scratched the surface, I was like, wow, I would like. I love that little 20-something-year-old me, but I do not recognize what her internal landscape was like at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's been such a like complete sea change because I've done these tiny seemingly stupid things on a regular basis, right? Like, we can just tell ourselves like, oh God, like this isn't doing anything.
Yeah.
And then you're like, 20 years down the track, like I am, and you're like, oh wow, no, this completely changed my whole life.
Yeah. Oh, that made me think of on Instagram the other day, you posted something like going on a silly little walk for my like silly mental health. And I was like, that's exactly like when I go for my walks, I'm not thinking like I'm walking for fitness. which I think that is maybe originally how it started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and now I'm like, oh no, I am literally my walking is my like walking meditation. That's where I'm
Mm-hmm.
like processing through the thoughts in my head. I'm able to like be moving and like get it out. And
Yeah.
like, uh, yeah, no, I'm like, I'm not walking for fitness. I'm walking for my mental,
Yeah.
like my self-care, my like,
Yeah, my
yeah.
being, like this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like that was the other thing that really surprised me about like about my self care practices when I kind of thought about it, like was how much like they have radicalized me, like how much doing these things that bring me in touch with my needs and my desires and bring me into connection with people beyond myself, right? Like, with the whole of aliveness, which sounds huge and like hyperbolic, but like, when you practice these little things that remind you that you're not separate from everything else, that yeah, then it stops being about weight loss or how your body looks or like even what you can get out of it, and you're like, oh no, like I am doing this to have the capacity so that I can show up for everything else here in the world, and fight what needs fighting and build what needs building, and unlearn what needs unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh wow, yeah, again, it started off as like a little yoga class back in like 2000 and whatever, and here we are now where I'm just like, cool, we're just gonna like burn down the internal empires that we've like learnt, and we're gonna rebuild something better.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly how I look at my practices, like my journaling every morning. I know
Mm.
that by me taking that time to dump everything out of my head, I'm then able to show up in such a different way throughout my day, like for myself and for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, I wouldn't be able to really like tap into those parts of myself and the connection with everybody else. So yeah, that's exactly how I think of my practices as well. And that's it's beautiful to have this conversation and to realize that and realize like how far I have come,
Mm.
and that's just part of my life now, and that's really beautiful.
Yeah, like, oh, we like learn how to care for ourselves at some point. It's like we keep relearning. It's great. Such a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're doing a great job.
we do a great job. I love this for us.
Yes, heck yes. Do you have anything else that you would like to say in closing before we promote what we've got going on?
I mean, I feel like I could literally talk about practice and how we do it for forever. So I think
Hmm.
to not take up any more of these lovely people's time, I will I will gladly leave it there. And yeah,
Okay.
yeah. How about you? Do you have any last little thoughts that kind of sprung up that you want to chat about?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
I could also talk about this for forever, and I foresee it happening.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for yeah, just for where this conversation leads and goes, and beyond us here in this moment. That's like what I'm getting at here. But I think that's it. So,
Amazing.
in closing, I wanted to give a little shout out to my ADHD Notion dashboard template, which is a digital portal into self care and empowerment for folks with ADHD. And there are a ton of different really great goodies on this dashboard. But some of my absolute favorite sections are there is a health progress and medication tracker. And this is one of my favorites because of a lot of what I said earlier. You can jot everything down, all the details about how you've been feeling. And so it's easy to reference info and things in between appointments or just for yourself. And that has been huge for me and all my chronic illness, and just being able to like see everything in one place has been really helpful. But the absolute big one is I do have a self-care toolkit included in there. It's in a cute little board. It's got cute little emojis in it. So if you just want to get started on having a list of resources to help you regulate your nervous system, it's customizable. You can experiment with the ideas. You can put your notes in each page. You can save, like whatever you want in there, add your own, subtract the ones that you don't like. There is a breathwork page in there because that is one of my resources that I personally use, which may be a funny story for another time. But inside that page is going to be all of Elle's information. So that template, you can check that out in my Gumroad shop on my website at BrigittMarieEnergyDesign.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at BrigittMarie.EnergyDesign. And Elle, is there anything that you would like to promote?
Well, I feel like I'm slightly less organized than you because I definitely don't have any of it written down. But yeah, I mean, I
have to, so I don't have to
I
pull
wrote
it out of my
everything else
brain
down, and then I was like, I'm sure I'll be able to just wing it. I don't know. We learn our lessons and then we don't learn our lessons. But yeah, this is the work that I do. I work with neurodivergence and queerness, and my work as a bodywitch really centers those things. So if you are interested in like diving deep into creating your own practice and your own kind of containers for yourself, then I have a course coming up called Resourced, which is a 3-month deep dive with a lot of one-to-one support into creating a self-care practice, creating a practice that connects you with your aliveness. And so in that, we'll talk a lot about the systems that we live within and how they kind of show up in your experience of your body and the rules that you think that you have to follow. We'll do a 30-day challenge because I love a 30-day challenge of daily practice. But you'll also get like lots of support and guidance for like how to find a practice that really fits you. So there'll be a lot of, there'll be like fortnightly live practices with me and a monthly call with me to kind of discuss any resistance that comes up. And yeah, you'll come out the other end with 3 months worth of information and testing and play and a practice that really supports you and leaves you resourced to have the capacity to deal with everything that comes at you in this insane world that we live in. So yeah, if you want to find more about that, then you can come check out my website. It is ellebowerjohnston.com, and you can find me on Instagram under the same name, all one word. And yeah, that's what I do.
Beautiful. That sounds absolutely lovely. Oh my goodness.
Really excited about it.
Thank you so much for hanging out today and chatting about all this stuff. Yeah, this was super fun. And I have been surprised and delighted.
Always.